Tonight I'm going to read to you, not from my own book, but from an absolutely wonderful, bright, shining soul from South Africa. Red SWIT story. That is wonderful. She's great, isn't it? I mean, I'm going to read the second chapter, and when I read it the first time, it just made me cry. I just started bawling at the end, really. So in case that happens, you're forewarned. I'm not taking, I'm not giving any guarantees. I am usually a bit on the water bucket side. So anyway, I'm going to read to you guys, and if you want to know more about SWIT, have a look just under the heading of this video. There's a lot of text about her, and there's also all her links, so you can go there. And she said she's going to join us live as well, not on the call, but she'll be around and comment as she is able to. I'm not quite sure. I think she had some technical issues, which is why she asked me to jump in for her, but I'm totally happy to do that. In fact, it's an absolute honor. And she's my first. I've been always posting about, guys, if you don't dare or if you have technical issues to go live, in the story, in the bookstore here, then you can just hop on and send me a message and tell me, can you please do that for me? And I will, we'll get a date fixed, and that's it. So that's what we're going to do. I'm reading from SWIT's book, and I'm totally impressed by this young lady. God, I'm sounding old, isn't it? But well, she's really, oh God, she's so cute. And SWIT, when you watch that, I will message you more tomorrow. I don't know, today was crazy as well. So yeah, I'm going to start now. And when you can comment. Oh, hi, Suzanne. That's wonderful that you're here. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to come back. I'm just going to read the whole text, really. And now that I know you can see me and hear me all right, because, I don't want to get sidetracked with anything else. I'm just going to read it. And then you can, comment in between. And I'll come back to all of that when I'm done. Okay? So here we go. So the book is called Flower in Flames, It's a Man's World by Switla Pound, Chapter 2, The White Flower, Flora's Story. Back in '83, well before I was born, of course, a beautiful, vibrant, shy and intelligent young lady with dreams filling her head and surpassing even her own expectations lived in a small town called Ranksville. Her beauty sparkled in one's eyes, in one's eye involuntarily, as if hit by the sun's reflection directly in the eyeball. She had an appearance to reckon with and uniquely stood out from the rest as a peacock with its flared bright colors in the midst of foul. Her brains, beauty, and aspirations battled within her persona to shine the brightest, for she had no comparison. In addition, she was bestowed with care, patience, love, understanding, and consideration, which made her the more unique, gorgeous, and appealing. Her body was in agreement with the rest of her being. Medium height, shiny, slightly dark skin, round, plumpish face, dancing eyes, and a perfect bottle figure, she was a fruit to behold. Ranksville was a small community town where everyone knew everyone, and communalism still stuck its tooth in the culture and lives of its residents, as Ubuntu was preached on a daily basis. Families that grew up together and got intertwined through generations to date resided here, carrying on as their fathers and their forefathers before them did. Their history and traditions were infused in their blood, full of culture, as some would say. Situated away from the busy city life, Ranksville had a slower pace of life and a more Achaia feeling, just on arrival. From the welcoming smiles of the people to the inviting nature that embraced the small town in its beauty, the roads here depicted the level of civilization or lack of it. Narrow, dusty gravel roads with potholes taking roots in most of them were quite a popular sight. Only a few pathways were tarred where the scheduled buses would run through, picking up and dropping travelers on their way along the demarcated routes. Cars and buses had to make way to herds of cattle, goats, and sheep, making their crossings to and from grazing lands, while piles of dung, still warm and steaming, greeted early morning travelers along the road. Infrastructure here was not up to the civilization standards of other towns nearby. Families resided on land passed down through generations per lineage. Each certain area then was affiliated with the families who were resident there. Land belonging to families stood demarcated into yards as it got cut and shared between heirs over years and moons. The house setup of most compounds here was quite similar, with one main house standing in the middle with tiled or zinc roofing, flanked by mud huts of different shapes and sizes. Thatched neatly with grass, varying slightly in design, except for the few that belonged to the deep-pocketed that had exotic designs and unique roofing. Instead of mud huts, most of these up-top compounds erected gazebos with eye-catching grassworks. These huts uniformly varied in shape and design too. Some were 8-cornered, some 6, some 4, and some just all round. Most of these had the traditional earth flooring, which was kept neat by applying cow dung frequently, except again those few that stood out with tiles and cemented floors. A show-off they were. Most of the yards had gravel pathways and grounds and got dusty in the wind spells that broke out at times. A few of the houses stood out and had quick brick pavements, those yet again belonging to the financially advantaged. Water holes and boreholes were not only communal sources of water, but also a place of meeting and catching up while one waited in the queues for their turn to fill up their containers. Grass bathrooms with no proper drainage except the ridges dug to direct the water out to nowhere completed the look for almost every household. Showers and taps were reserved for the wealthy. Everyone else had to make do with the old water and bucket system. Pit latrines and the alternative bush toilets were used frequently, often sending bothering swarms of green bomber flies buzzing everywhere irritatingly. Only those few aforementioned had the luxury of owning flushing indoor toilets. The town became a hive of activity and familiarity with the glare of the morning sun. Rank marshals shouted at the top of their lungs in unison with the hooting vehicles in attempts to outdo the competition and fill up first to cover more trips. Suspicious characters lurking in dangerous-looking places were never at a lack, as with any other town. Containers retailing in local cuisines studded every corner with various deliciously inviting smells, marketing the delicacies they held within. Inside them, old, middle-aged, and young women and girls wearing the familiar colorful traditional attires in an attempt to appeal to the tradition-rooted majority shared a smile with every face that passed by, all in hope that they would convince them to turn into their shop. Old caravans, tin houses, shacks, and rotting wooden cottages served as physical stores and outlets for these women. Life awoke with every rising sun here as the chit-chatter shadowed the progression of day and nature itself. Morning air was tainted by hints of animal odors blending with the naturally fresh scents from the jungles and trees around, presenting an unrefined but somehow superb and relaxing environment. The dams and rivers that flowed The dams and rivers that flowed in the vicinity gave their fair share to the scent of the area. Whistles from naughty birds chirping for attention and food, or maybe companionship, completed the perfection of this raw, untamed community, so it would seem. It seemed a serene, harmonic, and humane place to settle. Homely from the look of the eye, inviting indeed. Suitable for settlement to start and to raise a family. Here in this town stayed the aforementioned young lady. Her name was Flora. In this time and period, male chauvinism and dominance was almost a law in itself. Men were considered and demanded to be treated superior, in charge over any and all female counterparts. Women were taught and expected to subdue, obey, and be subordinate to males in all things considered important or otherwise. Even within their own households and families, they were to speak when spoken to and give an opinion if and when required. Speaking out of turn or without invitation was one of the highest forms of rebellion and disrespect here in this time. Women's voices were to echo support for whatever their men stipulated, despite their personal take on it, regardless of how questionable some of the decisions were, and they were only to be heard in maternity, household maintenance, and grocery list conversations. This was that time when strict dress codes and stringent morale codes were an epicenter of the society's functionality per their petty, biased, and tipped standards. Women were to wear strictly tailored feminine attires, dresses to be particular, as it was a penal conviction for one to even fathom the thought of pants or otherwise. Married women were to cover their heads at all times with a doek or hat, and not so much as converse with the opposite sex other than family, lest infidelity and loose morals be the dish of the day thereafter. Lengthy robes were more favored for their decency at covering almost every inch of a woman's body to the toes, while shorter designs attracted the familiar name-calling and tags of immorality and indecency. Longer and flared was preferably over longer and shaping, or shorter and revealing. Getting a formal job was not only taboo, it was also no easy task for the few empowered women that were sprouting. Preferences were given to men over women in any field anywhere. Most of those few numerable men that did consider hiring women required payments in kind, favors, before you could be hired. Being housewives, vendors, selling from home, being housemaids, and selling from those containers that studded every corner were the few job titles considered suitable for women. Even when it came to the training and programs offered in schools and institutes, a clear demarcation between men's courses and women's was evident and maintained faithfully. Fashion and fabrics, cookery and crockery, at times agriculture, were selected strictly for women who were funneled through without much of a choice. With the encouragement drawn from the discouragement and preposterous claims that women were not intelligent enough to take on certain subjects and fields. Mathematics, science, geography, and the likes were reserved for men. Women were considered to have no use of these. They fit nowhere in their future job description in this patriarchal society. The few women that were sent to school had no choice over what to study and what career to dream about. The setup was permanent and decisive. No such rules were pinned for men, though. Professionally and career-oriented, men could secure a job easily, despite being less qualified than women applying for the same job. Socially and martially, a man could frolic with whomever he so wished, at whatever time, wherever, for whatever reason, and no woman had a right to inquire on any such behaviors or suspicions, even when another woman was presented as the new co-bed sharer with one's husband, which was quite common a practice too. Excuse me. A man could marry, impregnate, or abuse females at will without consequence. It was acceptable for a man to cheat or be polygamous without regard to their partner's take on it. Forced entanglements were no stranger to most. Women had to but agree and conform without reaction or question. Many women fell victim to sexual abuse and rape without justice, despite some of the perpetrators being openly known. It was their given right as males not to be answerable. Rules, rules, rules. Women cannot walk here. Women cannot sit there. You cannot eat that. You cannot do that. Women this, women that. That was the way of life, while every law somehow leaned in favor of men and their rights and freedoms, unlimited beyond reasonable liberties, prejudicing every woman's freedom and right to life itself. All freedoms and rights and even mere decision-making for women were stripped and handed over to be regulated by their husbands and fathers. What to wear and when to wear it, where to go and how to get there, when to speak and what to say, how many children to bear and when, what children to keep and which ones to dispose of. All presided over and judgment passed on by men. Flora was born to a family of 4 siblings, 3 boys, and her being the only girl and the last born. Her older brothers, all 3, having been taught and raised to be men in their cultural definition, made no secret of their utter disregard for her existence within the household, nor did they heed her voice when family matters were placed on the table for decisions to be made. They took up the traits of typical men in this time. Her mere purpose in their eyes, as well as those of every other man in the community, was strictly to be a woman, per their societal definition, like her mother, as the rules dictated. Cleaning, cooking, sexual gratification, that too had its rules in favor of men, shunning any adventurous woman as a prostitute, bearing children and raising them, as well as staying at home and keeping it homely for everyone, but more especially for the men. Not only for your husband, but for his whole family. For when you were married, you got married to the whole family and him, and all men of their family hold contributory power to interfere in marital matters without boundaries. Ironing, fetching water, appearing as obedient and subordinate as you could be, keeping oneself well kept and trained for subordination, a stir of marital duties to future husbands for the yet to be married. Those were the duties and definition of a woman. Basically, her obligation, like every other woman, was to bow down to the self-imposed male gods in her life and family. No matter the heat and weight of the circumstances, a woman was to coil and worship the ground her husband walked on, more like spat on for her to lick deliberately. For those yet to be married, like Flora at this time, the words of your father and brothers were the rule of law to abide by till such a time as you would be handed over to him who purchased you. Ramifications for rebellious women who failed to conform with the status quo were harsh and definite, making sure to shun, embarrass, and abandon those that dared to divert or question. No woman wanted to be the talk of town or face the fury of these men, so they all just abided quietly like sheep led to the slaughter, voiceless, aggrieved, and broken. While being showered with superfluously dazzling titles to hide the oozing blood flowing from open wounds, Mrs., fiancée, wife, mother of my children. Meanwhile, every household greeted you with walls adorned with colorfully loud frames and art pieces, preaching of women's importance, power, and pivotal roles, contradicting the reality of their actual lives. Musha Mukadzi, which is Shona, a home is a woman. This one was partially true only to the extent that women had an obligatory duty by birth and sexuality to stay at home and maintain the same. Behind every successful man is a powerful woman. More like behind every man is an afflicted, despotized, and encumbered woman trampled on daily. Watinta umfazi, watinta imbokodo. Josa. And I'm sorry I can't do the clicking sounds. I apologize. You hit a woman, you hit a rock. For their strength and will within go beyond bounds. They absorbed all the disrespect, disregard, and abuses, and somehow managed to still wear a smile and raise children. Frames and portraits portraying happiness, equality, and love that was non-existent, except to the extent of the existence of these frames, which women wore together with the plastic smiles they kept hidden to use when called for, one big masquerade, while shrouding their actual sordid, bedraggled, begrimed, and besmirched reality. Unions were presented in their most jubilant and love-filled versions in accordance with a strictly written and directed home rehearsal script before every public family appearance. In this world, the picture presented was more valuable than reality making its way into the light, with the obvious director in charge of how it all should play out, the head of the house. Rings burdened with precious stones adorned those fragile feminine fingers to hide the soot, broken nails, and bleeding veins from sight, with shining ignorance quantified into actual currency. A mark of ownership and wealth for the men. Women got lost in destructive, envious gossip contests over the size and cost of the stones they carried on their fingers. Selective amnesia, choosing to glorify that tiny speck of meaningfulness and value on their bruised fingers while abandoning lamenting for the obliquitous and reproachful reality of their marriages and mere daily lives. The men spent their days basking in their ego and ordering females around as kings to their concubines. They would sit at bars whistling and slurring at women that passed, while some spent days planning and executing violence and abuse on the weaker sex. Women hunts ruining many of their rampage, after which they would pride themselves and brag about the sexual prowess which they took without being given. Those that were married took pleasure in tasting fruit outside their gardens, while closing and locking up those already in their garden and custody with brute force. Yet another show of power and assertment of domination. They would confine their wives to the family home and freely perform despicable, unspeakable acts which never got to their servants' wives' ears. Even if and when they did get to their wives' knowledge, it made no difference. A man's decision was the last and only voice to be heard, and his actions not to be questioned or reacted to. They drank and got drunk, beat and raped at will, while in the women's world bodies got dug up from pits covered by earth and worms, while some were fished from rivers drenched and rotting, and others just left to drown in their own blood. In their homes, their voices and cries hushed, silenced, and merely disregarded. A system causally resident in Ranksville and around. Roots firm and watered over years and generations to an extent even other women considered headstrong women a taboo and looked on them with scorn and spite, where they were meant to hold up and support. Despite all this surrounding her, Flora grew up to be an intelligent, curious, and inquisitive young lady with a thirst to grow and learn, taking the good she saw and adopting it while using the bad as life lessons. With a head like that, she was always aspiring to know more, to discover the unknown, and to dream on, which in turn was contrary to the expectations and dictation of the majority, her own family included, in the forefront, except for her mother, who was the pillar she leaned on for a lifetime. Faced with this dilemma of harboring dreams, goals, and a life whose scope fell well outside the realm of what her kind was said to be by her own society, on one hand juxtaposed to the teachings of subordination and pleasing the self-proclaimed male demigods, whose fangs were ever ready to devour into feminine blood, on the other hand, she decided to join the rebellious women gang and shy away from the rules oppressing her kind. To try an alternative route with hope of luck, accepting the risk and possibility of not succeeding in an unknown world. It was better than succumbing to society and traditions here. Serving to satisfy the ego of these alpha males as they sunk their vibranium-sharpened fangs to subjugate, enthrall, coerce, enslave, and overcome women, merely for being of a different species. For indeed, a man's world is totally divergent from a woman's in perspective and thought. Different species. was not an option for her. There was no place for an inquisitive, intelligent, and dissatisfied woman in this world, a man's world. This place would just kill the flame she had, the flower she was, and force her to fall in line behind her mother and the rest of the women. With vivid memories of how her mother's sobs used to rock her to bed and the echo of slaps from her father and the innumerable times inconsideration, belittlement, and disregard came her way in any aspect of actual importance, Flora was even more encouraged and headstrong to divert from this path. Instead of breaking in these winds of daily life, she rode on the saying, "What does not kill you makes you stronger," and dived in to pursue her dreams. They say sometimes you need to leave a life set for you to live a life meant for you. Over the years, as Flora grew into womanhood, she observed, learned, and deducted. Family lost its meaning as she understood it was supposed to be. The community was never really a concern, as they were just shadows humming and buzzing past as days went by. With their standards seeming even more biased and absurd, the more she inspected them, praising and upholding a system that kept the community running while somehow completely disregarding women in the equation. It would take eons for change to come here. It would require a total overhaul, tearing down the strongholds of the system. Every year, daily, weekly, monthly, she watched as her mother became frail, drained by a life of servitude with no gratitude or acknowledgement. She watched as numerous and various children were brought to meet their real father, who happened to be her father, and every other day it would be another woman or girl and her mother to accept with no question, query, or complaint. Watching this belittling, cheapening, and disrespectful train run over her mother to sickness, depression, and merely floating within her own mind was the final nail in her decision to phase away from this system in search of a better life. Her mother, Nana, having suffered a lifetime under this oppression, wished nothing like the life she had for her daughter. She gave her full blessing and support to Flora getting an education in hopes of her child getting a life divergent from hers. She gave all she had to prepare her daughter onto a different path. Nana's name was Tenjiwe Langa, but it was taboo to call her anything other than Makulu, Gogo, and her favorite, Nana. She always said, well, they, the men, do nothing close to anything women do, and yet they take all the credit and the respect that comes with it. In her old age, since a few years back, she decided she would either be addressed and treated with respect by everyone alike, or you would be cut off from her circles and get a lecture on how things really ought to be. She is the one who taught me and all of us that respect is earned and not demanded, a life lesson worth the wisdom she carried. This brave woman supported Flora, risking her very livelihood and welfare, ever encouraging her to push for her dreams, even if it meant breaking set boundaries. And there we go. I told you it's going to happen. Okay. With her mother's support and all the encouragement the community gave with their negativity, Flora soldiered on in hope, despite despair, for a brighter future, not only for herself, but also for her mother, her children, and family to come. She went to school and excelled above even her brothers, taboo as it was in her community, and basically all around her. She passed her national examinations easily, to her mother's pride. Thereafter, she applied to universities in secrecy with the help of her mother and her friend Stacy. Stacy and her, being age mates and on the same academic level, made preparations to grow wings and leave home. She then left home to pursue further studies, with destiny awaiting. It was no easy road, rather it was laced with all sorts of pricklies, from thorns and solid steel nails to needles and double-edged swords, all lying in wait for her. Challenging and painful as her background, upbringing, and current life were, Flora made it to university where, being one with a caring heart and willingness to help, she decided to take up social work as her career of choice. At which point her father discovered she was pursuing her schooling further and took no time or hesitation in disowning her, as was traditional, banishing her from the home she knew, casting her into the vast ocean all on her own. With pessimism and doubt weighing her down constantly, though never giving up and never losing sight of her dreams, she kept pushing against the winds. Strong woman she was, and her dreams did come to fruition. There is a law in psychology that if you form a picture in your mind of what you would like to be, and you keep and hold that picture there long enough, you will soon become exactly as you were thinking. William James. Indeed, with perseverance and persistence, Flora became that which she dreamed of becoming. That woman, that Flora, is my mother. Okay. Thank you, sweet. Thank you. And please give my love to your mother. Okay. So is, stories like this of women succeeding against all odds and, carving a path, a better way for the future for their own children always really gets to me. I mean, I'm a mother of 3, so I know the feeling. Me too. I'm overwhelmed too, Swit. Thank you. Was it sweet? I'm not sure how to, I should have asked you before. Excuse me. I'm sorry for that. But it is such a beautiful, beautiful story. And I'm so looking forward to reading all of it. Josephine says it's powerful. It is absolutely powerful, yes. So, yeah. Suzanne just put big red hearts, yes. Totally feel you on that. So let me go and gather myself again before I have my next thing coming on and in another group. And thank you so much, Swit. It was a total honor to have you allow me to read this for you. And it's really very touching, and it's such a special book. So, and there's a second part to that as well. So you can read all about that in the info text at the top. So, right. Suzanne said, so it says, I would be honored to have you read the rest. Thank you. You're welcome. I would love to, definitely. I'm going to message you tomorrow when I've got peace and quiet, because I've got another thing on in 20 minutes. So that's like, the whole day was crazy. But tomorrow I've got like downtime. And Suzanne said, it's amazing to think that if her mother had not done that, she would be there too. Yes, absolutely. Somebody's got that to break that cycle of evil, and that usually comes at a great personal cost and sacrifice. And the results speak for themselves. Look at you, sweet. You are a beautiful young woman, shining, glorious, speaking out for voiceless women and children. And you write books. Who did that before you? In your family, in your lineage, look at that. What a wonderful, amazing mother you have, and what a wonderful, amazing grandmother as well. So, you they've laid the foundation for you to really shine, and they shine with you, in you, through you. So give them my love, okay? And now I'm just gonna go off and cry and the next 20 minutes. So much love.